It started as just another harsh night on the streets. A weary beggar sat quietly on a dimly lit sidewalk, his loyal dog curled up beside him for warmth. Passers-by barely spared a glance, their hurried steps echoing in the cold air. But then, out of the shadows, came trouble, a group of rowdy thugs looking for an easy target. They laughed and jeered as they surrounded the man, mocking his ragged appearance and barking cruelly at his dog. They thought they had the upper hand, smug in their belief that no one would stand up to them. What they didn't realize, though, was that this wasn't just any ordinary beggar. Beneath the tattered clothes and humble demeanor was someone they never expected to encounter: Hollywood icon Keanu Reeves. Known for his kindness and generosity, he had taken on this disguise for reasons no one could have guessed. As the tension escalated, the thug's mocking laughs rang out in the still night. But something about the man's calm, unwavering presence felt oddly out of place. And then, as one of them reached for the dog, the story took an unbelievable turn that would leave everyone watching in shock. Stay tuned to find out what happens next. The lead thug smirked as he lunged toward the dog, thinking it would be an easy show of dominance. But just as his hand reached out, the man's voice cut through the air, low, steady, and commanding. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." His tone wasn't loud, but it was enough to make the group pause, confused by the sudden shift in energy. The beggar, who had seemed so vulnerable moments ago, now sat upright, his sharp gaze locking onto the thugs with an intensity they didn't expect. The group exchanged uneasy glances, their bravado flickering like a weak flame in the wind. One of them tried to laugh it off. "What are you gonna do? Call your dog on us?" Another chuckled, though his voice wavered. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out and gently scratched the dog behind its ears, his calm presence unsettling them further. What they didn't know was that Keanu had been living this way intentionally for weeks. He had been immersing himself in the harsh realities of life on the streets, preparing for a role that demanded more than just acting. It required understanding. But in this moment, it wasn't about the role. It was personal. One of the thugs, emboldened by the silence, stepped closer. "You think you're some kind of tough guy," he sneered. The others snickered, though their laughter felt forced. The man, still seated, didn't flinch. He simply adjusted the brim of his worn-out cap, his face shadowed but calm. The dog, sensing the tension, stood up and growled low, its protective instincts kicking in. Keanu glanced at his companion, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You don't want to test him," he said almost casually. His words were simple, but there was an edge to them, a quiet warning that hinted at something the thugs couldn't place. The leader laughed it off, but his movements were less confident now. What they didn't see was that Keanu had been watching them long before they approached. He'd noticed the way they prowled the streets, looking for trouble, targeting those who couldn't fight back. It wasn't the first time he'd witnessed this kind of cruelty during his time undercover. But tonight, he wasn't going to let it slide. The thugs, unaware of who they were dealing with, began circling closer, their taunts growing louder. The streetlights flickered above, casting long shadows as the tension reached a breaking point. The leader of the group, emboldened by the nervous chuckles of his crew, stepped forward with a sneer. "What's the matter, old man? Afraid your mutt's all bark and no bite." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pocket knife, flicking it open with a flourish meant to intimidate. The blade glinted under the dim streetlights, catching the attention of onlookers who had begun to gather from a safe distance. Keanu slowly stood, brushing the dirt off his jacket as he rose to his full height. Despite the ragged clothes, his presence was commanding, and for a moment, the group faltered. The dog moved closer to his side, its growl growing louder, a warning that went ignored. "You should put that away," Keanu said quietly, his voice calm but carrying an authority that silenced the murmurs of the crowd. The leader laughed nervously but didn't back down. Instead, he lunged forward, aiming to scare the man into retreat. But what happened next caught everyone off guard. Keanu moved with a speed and precision that defied his appearance, effortlessly stepping aside and disarming the thug with a single fluid motion. The knife clattered to the ground, and the crowd gasped in unison. The other thugs hesitated, their confidence shaken as they realized they were no longer in control. But the tension didn't break. It only thickened as Keanu locked eyes with each of them, silently daring them to make their next move. The air was heavy, every second stretching into an eternity as the standoff reached its boiling point. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the knife lay on the ground, but the leader of the thugs wasn't ready to back down. His face twisted with anger and embarrassment as he barked orders at his crew. "Don't just stand there, get him." The group hesitated, their confidence visibly shaken, but loyalty to their leader and the desire to save face pushed them forward. They moved as a unit, thinking sheer numbers would tip the balance. But as they closed in, something unexpected happened. A sleek black car rolled to a stop at the edge of the scene, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The doors opened, and two figures stepped out, their calm and composed presence adding an entirely new layer of tension. They weren't ordinary bystanders. Keanu's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. The second figure, a woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, scanned the scene before locking eyes with the leader of the thugs. "You've got two options," she said firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Walk away now, or deal with the consequences." The stakes had shifted dramatically, and no one knew what was coming next. The leader of the thugs hesitated, his bravado cracking under the weight of the stranger's words and Keanu's unshaken stance. He glanced back at his crew, hoping for support, but they were frozen in place, their earlier confidence now completely gone. The man who had stepped out of the car took a step forward, his sharp eyes narrowing as he gestured toward the knife on the ground. "Pick it up if you're feeling brave. Let's see how far that gets you." The leader's hand twitched, but before he could act, the woman spoke again, her voice cutting through the tension. "You don't recognize him, do you?" She nodded toward Keanu, her words dripping with irony. "You just tried to rob one of the most famous faces on the planet." The realization hit the thugs like a freight train. Whispers rippled through the crowd as people started recognizing him too. Keanu Reeves. The man who had taken on this humble disguise wasn't just any actor. He was someone with a reputation for kindness, humility, and, as they had just learned, strength. The leader stumbled back, muttering excuses, but Keanu raised a hand to stop him. "You have a choice," he said, his voice steady but not unkind. "Walk away and think about what kind of person you want to be, or stay and face the consequences." The thugs didn't need a second warning. They scattered, leaving behind their bravado and any remaining shred of dignity. Just as the tension seemed to break, the man from the car stepped closer to Keanu, lowering his voice. "You okay?" he asked, revealing he wasn't just a stranger. He was part of Keanu's trusted circle, quietly keeping watch during the actor's time on the streets. Keanu nodded, then crouched down to pet his dog, who wagged its tail as if nothing had happened. But just as the crowd began to disperse, someone in the audience stepped forward, a young woman holding a worn-out journal. "Mr. Reeves," she said hesitantly, "I've seen you out here before. You saved more people than you realize." Keanu looked at her, surprised, as she handed him the journal filled with notes and stories from others who had crossed paths with him during his undercover journey. It was a reminder that even in disguise, his kindness had made an impact. With a quiet smile, he tucked the journal under his arm and walked away into the night, leaving behind a crowd that would never forget what they had witnessed. As Keanu walked into the night, the crowd slowly began to disperse, their conversations buzzing with awe and disbelief. The young woman stood clutching her empty hands, overwhelmed by the moment. The journal she'd given him wasn't just filled with stories. It was a testament to the quiet impact one person could have on the world, even when no one was watching. The thugs, now long gone, had learned a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. And those who witnessed the scene, from passersby to bystanders, left with a deeper understanding of kindness and strength. It wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about the power of standing up for what's right, even in the smallest moments. Keanu and his loyal dog continued their walk through the dimly lit streets. His time undercover had shown him more than he ever imagined, not just about the struggles of the homeless, but about the resilience and humanity that often go unnoticed. Later that night, back in the safety of his modest apartment, he opened the journal. Page after page revealed the lives he touched in ways he hadn't expected. With a quiet sigh and a grateful smile, he patted his dog and whispered, "We did good."